Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is Kuf Gimel in Masechet Menachot. We are at the two dots on the last two lines in the second to last line of Kuf Bet Amabet. Let me share my screen and we will get started. So the Mishnah that we learned near the end of the day yesterday said that if one specified certain flour would be used for a pan or a griddle mincha, if it was used for the other type of mincha, it would be invalid. And so as we pick up at the two dots on the second to last line of Kuf Bet Amabet, the Gemara quotes the relevant piece of the Mishnah, and it says, Zu lahavi b'machvat. If I'm going to bring this flour in a machvat. And then the Mishnah continues that if you then bring it in a marcheshes, it's going to be invalid. But Tanya, 1 second though, we have a brisa that says the following. It says lo kidshum klisha race, that when you put something in the wrong vessel, it doesn't sanctify them. Take a look at Rashi. Tanya lo kidshum otan klisha race. That sanctified vessel will not cause the sanctification shevian bo that you put it into if it's the wrong thing. The kaven de lo kidshum, but now that you're telling me that it doesn't get sanctified, amai psulo, why is it invalid? Hamatzi lahadrunu. Why not just return it? And then you put it in the right vessel. So if you swore about a marcheshes, you'll switch from the machbat to the marcheshes. And if you swore about a machbat, you'll switch from the marcheshes to the machbat. So either way, you'll get it right. Why can't you change? Especially given that we just said that the service vessel's not going to consecrate if it's the wrong service vessel. So Amar Abaye explains, Lo kidshim likarev, aval kidshim lepasel. That there's a difference, that actually sanctification can come in multiple forms. It can be sufficient to allow you to offer a sacrifice, and it can be sufficient not to allow you to offer the sacrifice, but just to invalidate the sacrifice. And so when we say lo kidshum, it klishares, if you put it in the wrong klishares, it means that it's not going to sanctify it so that you could actually do the kamitza and put the kamitza on the mizbeach, but rather it is just sanctify. It is going to only sanctify it enough to make it invalid. And so that's why it says it doesn't sanctify it, because it doesn't sanctify it enough to put it on the mizbeach. So Amar Abaye, and Abaye said not only about that, but he also said lo shanu when they taught the Mishnah about switching between a machvat and a marcheshes, and how if you do so, it's an invalid sacrifice. As Rashi tells us, lo shanu dezula hevi b'machvat behevi b'marcheshes psula, that if you say that you're going to bring this in a machvat and instead you bring it in a marcheshes, that it's invalid. When do we say that? As we turn to Kov Gimel Amid Aleph, Elishikivaan b'shas neder. It's only true when at the time you vowed to bring the mincha, you also say the kind of vessel. Meaning, as Rashi tells us, top Rashi on Kuf Gimel Amid Aleph, Ella shikavan b'shas neder. Hare alai, this is what you say. Hare alai lehevi as zuma b'machavas. I'm going to bring this in a machavas. So that's where, if you bring it in a marcheshes, it'll be invalid. Aval b'shas hafrasha. But if you say, the only thing happens when you only mention the vessel type, when you are actually setting aside the flour, and Rashi helps clarify the situation. Next Rashi, Aval b'shas hafrasha to b'shas neder amar harei alayim mincha stam. When you are making the vow, you just say, I'm bringing a mincha, and you don't specify the nature of the mincha. Ubishas hafrasha, and now when you set aside the flour, kava, you fix it. But Amar, you identify this, you specify the vessel that you're going to use. Amar, and you say, Zu abi l'shem neder b'machbas. I'm going in to bring this to fulfill my vow, and I'm going to do it in a machavat. So in that situation, even though you actually now bring it in a marcheshes, doesn't matter. Why? Because the Torah says kasher nadarta below kasher hafrashta. That when the Torah says that you made a neder, right? It says motzah. This is Dvarim Kav Gimel Pasuk Kav Dalid. Motzah svasecha tishmor. That you should watch what your lips say. What comes out of your lips. Ba'asisa kasher nadarta, and you should do what you vow. La Hashem Elokecha, to God. Nidaba, a free will offering, a donation, asher dibarta befika, whatever you say with your mouth. So the point is that the phraseology of this pasuk focuses on the neder, that if you make a neder and then you qualify that neder and you add an additional condition to the neder, well, that additional condition is nothing. It's not actually a part of your vow. And so as a result, you only have to fulfill what you say at the time you make the vow. And when you set aside the flour, if you say, you know what, I'm also going to commit to doing this as a marcheshes, well, that doesn't matter. You can then switch to a machavas. It's going to still be a valid sacrifice. It marnami. And you know what? This statement was said by others as well. Amar Rabbi Acha bar Chanina, Amar Rabbi Asi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So it was all said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Lo shanu ela shekva'an b'shas neder. When we say that if you switch from a machavas to a marcheshes, it's going to be invalid, that's when you tell the world and you say out loud when you're making the neder that you're going to bring the mincha, that you're going to bring the mincha in the form of a machavat. And then if you switch it to a marcheshes, it'll be invalid. Or if you say that you're going to bring it in the marcheshes and you switch to a machavat, it's going to be invalid. Aval. But if when you make the vow, you only say that you're going to bring a mincha, and you didn't specify what kind of mincha it's going to be, b'shas hafrasha lo, it's not going to be disqualified if you only specify the vessel type, whether it's machavat or marcheshes, at the time that you set aside the flour. Because the Torah says, as we just saw, kasher nadarta, v'lo kasher hafrashta. Okay, so that brings us to the next Mishnah, and the Mishnah continues to discuss situations where one commits to one type of mincha and brings something else. So ha'omer harei alai mincha min ha'sa'orim. If you say that you're going to bring a mincha from barley, the problem is that there is no mincha from barley. The mincha, all the minchas that are voluntary are from wheat. Now, I said that there's no mincha from barley. Again, what I mean is that there's no voluntary mincha from barley. There are two minchas that involve barley. One is the omer sacrifice, and the second is the sota sacrifice. But you can't bring either of those voluntarily, and so as a result, those are not what we're talking. You can't say that you're going to do it. And so as a result, even if you say that you're going to bring it with barley, yavim min hachitim, you have to bring it from wheat. There is no voluntary mincha barley offering. Kemach, if you say that you're going to bring it from the less refined flour, tough luck. There are, again, some of the minchas involve less refined flour, but not any of the voluntary ones. So yavi solis, you have to bring it from the fine flour. Below shemen, below levona. If you say you're going to bring it without oil and without levona, again, the mincha of a sinner is brought that way. That's the mincha that's associated with the korban olav yored. But you can't volunteer to do that. So yavi shem and levona, you have to bring it with oil and levona. Chatzi isaron. If you say you're going to bring a half isaron, but the minimum size is a full isaron, so yavi isaron shalem, you have to bring a full isaron. Isaron umechza, you say you're going to bring 1.5 isaronim, so yavi shnayim, you have to bring 2, because you're going to see that, as we'll see in the Gemara, that you're going to need to bring one for saying mincha and the other for saying an isaron. So Rabbi Shimon poter, and in all of these cases, Rabbi Shimon says you're exempt. Shalo is nadib gederacham is nadbim, because you didn't make an oath the way people make an oath. If you're going to volunteer to bring a sacrifice, you're going to do it in the proper way. And so as a result, Rabbi Shimon says, sorry, no, that's not a valid oath, or maybe good luck, fortunate are you because it's not a valid oath, and therefore you are not going to have to bring anything. So the Gemara begins, Amai, why in the world would any of these nidarim be valid? Neder ufischo imohu. It is an oath with an opening to explain why you want it to not take effect at all. And so as a result, Amar Chizkiya Hamani Beis Shammai. This is actually Beis Shammai. That's who's saying this. And I'll just let's do that Rashi. The Rashi on the question, right? Nadar upatcho pitcho imohu, right? So the Rashi says, this is third line down in the narrow lines of Rashi at the top of Kuf Gimel Amid Aleph. Neder upitcho imohu im haneder, that with the vow, Amar Pesach, he offered an opening, shemischaret bo, that shows that he regrets making the oath. The Kavan de Amar min hasaorim, since he said that it was coming from a barley, Amrinan de ein bidato lahevi klum. It must be that his intention is not to bring anything. The Adam Yodea she'ein mincha min hasaorim, because people know that there's no barley mincha offering that's voluntary. And so as a result, maybe that's the situation, meaning why don't we say that that's the situation? And so again, Chizkiah says that we're following Beis Shammai. And back into the Gemara, 2 lines below where the Gemara starts, the Amrei Tefos Lashon Rishon. According to Beis Shammai, you focus on the first language that the person said. And what did this person say? He said, I'm going to bring a mincha. And before he got to the part about saying that it was going to be from barley, he's already made a vow. And so as a result, we're going to focus on his first words. So in second, Ditanan, and we have a Mishnah that shows that in fact this is what Beis Shammai says, because if you say Hareini Nazar mina gorogros umina devela, that if you say you're going to be a Nazir from dried figs or from pressed figs, Beis Shammai omrim Nazir, Beis Hillel omrim eino Nazir. Beis Shammai says that just because once you say Hareini Nazir, you're done. You're already going to be a Nazir, and so as a result, he focuses on the first words, whereas Beis Hillel says no, you got to focus on the entire statement. And here this person is not going to be a Nazir at all, because there is no such thing as a Nazir that's related to dried figs or pressed figs. A Nazir is all about grapes and wine, and so as a result, he would not be a Nazir at all. So that's answer number 1 as to how our Mishnah could be understood, that our Mishnah follows Beis Shammai. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, afilu tema Beis Hillel. You can even say that our Mishnah is like Beis Hillel. But Omer ilu hayisi yodea she'ein nodrin kach, lo hayisi nodr kach elakach. That the situation, we have to just clarify the situation. According to Rabbi Yochanan, our Mishnah is dealing with the following situation, where you tell the person, listen, by the way, you know that there is no such thing as a barley offering, a barley mincha. And he says, oh, I didn't know that. If I had known that, I would have said a wheat mincha offering. Well, in that situation, it's as if you swore a wheat offering. And so as a result, we'll follow what your real intention was when you tell us what your intention was. And so as a result, that's the situation. And we would not say, we would continue to say that if in fact the person responded when told, that there's no such thing as a barley offering, and he says, oh, well, then I wouldn't have wanted to make a barley offering. I wouldn't want to make any offering at all. Well, then we would say, you know what? Okay, no offering at all is required. And because that's what Beis Hillel says, Beis Hillel focuses on your entire words. And if you didn't really intend the right thing, well, then your intention is ignored, and we'll say that you're not going to be obligated in a mincha offering. Okay, so having now made these 2 statements of Chizkiah and Rabbi Yochanan to explain our Mishnah, we're now going to have 2 other statements, and we're going to note that these statements seem to contradict Chizkiah and Rabbi Yochanan's earlier statements. So let's take a look. So Amar Chizkiah lo shanu ela de Amar mincha minas orim. When our Mishnah says that your vow is going to be a valid vow, that is only because you said seorim, meaning barley. Aval Amar mincha min ha'adashim, if you were to say that you were bringing a mincha from lentils, lo, then you would not be obligated in bringing a mincha offering. So 1 second, michti, let's take a look. Chizkiah Kaman Amar Shmaite. Who is he speaking like when he said his earlier statement that in explaining the Mishnah? He said Kibeit Shammai. He's like Beit Shammai. Ubeit Shammai mishum tfos lashon rishonu. And Beit Shammai says, focus on the first words that come out of this person's mouth. So Malimin Sa'orim, Malimin Adashim. Who cares whether he says that it's Sa'orim or Adashim? If the person says, I'm going to bring a mincha, we stop right there and he has to bring a mincha. Who cares whether he then says from barley or from lentils? His later statement means nothing. So this seems to be that Chizkiah has changed, or there's some kind of inconsistency. Maybe there's something wrong. Hadarbe, the Gemara explains, no, he retracted his view. He actually changed his mind and he agreed with Rabbi Yochanan. Umay taima hadarbe. Why did he change his mind? So Amar Rabba explains, Masnisin kshitei. Actually, the Mishnah was difficult for him. Why was the Mishnah difficult? My irya detani mincha min hasaorim. Why did the Mishnah specifically choose min hasaorim to reference barley? Listening min ha'adashim. It could have told us something even more remarkable. That even if you were to say a mincha from lentils, you would be obligated to bring a sacrifice. Elashmami na mishum detayu. So as a result, Chizkiah figured out, I must have made a mistake. I'm sorry, Shmamina Mishum Detayu. Well, it must be that the reason that we didn't say it is because saying lentils is such a big mistake. And Bisa'orim Toy. And when it comes to barley, people do make a mistake and think that maybe a barley mincha is possible, and therefore you're going to have to bring it. But Ba'adashim Lotai. But people don't make such a big mistake with respect to lentils. And so as a result, maybe that's why our Mishnah specifically mentioned barley and not lentils, and therefore my original explanation, Chizkiah would say, doesn't work at all, and I have to switch and agree with Rabbi Yochanan. Va'amar Rabbi Yochanan, and now we have another statement by Rabbi Yochanan, which also will then be inconsistent with Rabbi Yochanan's earlier statement, because afilu min ha'adashim. He says, you know what? It even applies, Rabbi Yochanan Amar afilu min ha'adashim. He says it even applies if you're vowing lentils, meaning that if you say, I'm going to bring a mincha from lentils, and you then ask the person, you know that there's no such thing as a mincha from lentils, and the person says, you know what? I didn't know that. I really would, if I would have known that, I would have said a mincha from wheat, and we're going to say that he has to bring wheat. So, michti, 1 second though. Rabbi Yochanan Kiman Amr Lishmaite. Who is Rabbi Yochanan talking like? Beis Hillel. He agrees with Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel Mishum Detayu. Beis Hillel focuses on whether the mistake is within the realm of reasonable possibility or nobody makes that mistake. So when you say Bisa'orim Tai, people will make a mistake with respect to barley. And so as a result, what a person intends matters when you say barley, because people will think, hey, there are minchas that are from barley, so maybe I can bring a mincha from barley, so I'll make the oath about a mincha from barley. And now we come and tell the person, by the way, I understand that it's a reasonable mistake that you might make, so did you really intend barley? And the person says, no, if I would have known that there's no such thing as barley, I'll bring wheat. But Adashim lotai. But when it comes to lentils, people don't make that mistake. And so as a result, according to Beit Hillel, you would never even ask the person what to do. So how can Rabbi Yochanan say that the statement in our Mishnah is true even when it comes to lentils It's not true, according to Beis Hillel, when it comes to lentils. That's too big a mistake. Nobody would ever do that. And therefore, we don't say that it's reasonable for somebody to say, oh, I didn't know. And so as a result, I really mean wheat. No, people know there's no such thing as a lentil offering. Lentils aren't a grain. It's not a mincha. And so as a result, that's nobody's going to make that mistake. So the Gemara answers, Rabbi Yochanan was not giving his own opinion, but rather l'dvarav de Chizkiah ka'amarlei. He was speaking to Chizkiah, and he was telling him, at my time hadrat pach. Why are you changing your mind? You are changing your mind because mishum delo katani min hadashim, because you think that the Mishnah should have taught the bigger lesson about lentils. But you know what? Maybe the bigger lesson is actually telling us about barley. Dilma lomi boikamer. Maybe you could say that, you know what? It's even more, there's no need to say lentils. That when it comes to barley, once I tell you that if the oath is valid with respect to barley, of course it's valid with respect to lentils. Because the following, lomi by mina adashim. I don't need to tell you that it's not, that if you say a mincha from lentils, that it's going to focus on your first words. Because what do we think is going on when the person says from lentils? Here's what we think the person is going on, and this is based on Rashi. That the person said, I'm going to bring a mincha. And then he realized, oh my gosh, I really don't want to bring a mincha. And so immediately, within Tokadei Dibor, he adds, from lentils. Why did he add from lentils? Because he's trying to retract. But we don't, according to Beit Shammai, allow a person to retract in that situation, because it's clear that he never began the statement of I'm going to bring a mincha with the intention to conclude that statement with from lentils, because that's, nobody even ever thinks that you can do that. And so as a result, clearly what's happening is he intended to make a valid vow, and then he was just trying to retract the vow by saying from barley, and that doesn't work. We don't let him do that. That what he's trying to do is retract the vow, utfos lashon rishon, and we say, based on Beis Shammai, based according to Chizkiah's approach, that we focus on his first language, and his first language was an oath to make a proper mincha. But ella afilu min ha'orim nami. But you know what? The bigger chiddush is to tell you that, you know what? Even if the person says from barley, that we could say that, you know what? When he began to open his mouth to offer the vow of bringing a mincha, he actually intended to say that I'm bringing the mincha from barley. And he's making a mistake because there is no such thing. And nonetheless, afilu hachi tvos lashon rishon, and that's why our Mishnah mentioned it. That even in that situation where one could argue that from the very beginning of his statement he was making a mistake, and therefore he should not have been treated as making a valid vow, we say even in that situation we focus on his first words. His first words mentioned a mincha, and so even though later in that same sentence he then says from barley, we ignore the end of that sentence and we require him to bring a mincha offering. And so that's the question that Chizkiah, that Rabbi Yochanan is asking Chizkiah. He's saying, Chizkiah, you don't need to retract. Your thought can work with our Mishnah. There is no further aspect of that conversation. We now switch, and the Gemara details a different limitation on our Mishnah. So, Amar Ze'iri Lo Shanu, as we turn to Kuf Gimel Amud Bet, top of the page. Amar Ze'iri Lo Shanu Ela de Amar Mincha. That the key element of what we're talking about is where he says a mincha offering. Aba lo Amar Mincha, lo. But if he doesn't mention the mincha offering, meaning he just says, there are two possible meanings. Let's take a look at Rashi, and Rashi tells us both of the possible readings. So, top Rashi on Kuf Gimel Amud Bet. The Tfos Lashon Rishon, that we only say, Lo Shanu de Tfos Lashon Rishon, we only will say that the the language, the first language that a person says takes effect. Ella de Amar Mincha. Only where the person says that the Mincha min Sorim, where he uses the language of a Mincha from Sorim, from barley. De'ika Lamemer, because in that situation, Kaven de Amar Mincha, once he says that I'm going to bring a Mincha, Lamincha Gemura Kamechavin. Maybe he intends, this is that he's going to bring a Mincha, a fully valid Mincha. Aval Amar Mincha Sa'orim. But if instead of using the longer language of a mincha, minha sa'orim, where it's not clear that you're going to modify mincha when the word mincha comes out of your mouth, but instead of saying mincha, you say minchat sa'orim, a mincha of sa'orim, so it means the same thing. But when you said the word mincha, it was minchat. And so as a result, it was already clear from the word that you said that it's going to be qualified. Mincha asa'orim kai. The word mincha is applying to the word barley, upater, and therefore you're not obligated to bring anything to leika lamemer tos lashon rishon, because in that situation you can't say that the first language applies. Lishna achrina. Alternatively, and maybe you could even say also, aval lo amar mincha lo. What does he bet here say? Ella Amar. It says should be Ella. Ella Avalo Amar Mincha lo. But if you don't say the word mincha, then no, you haven't done any. You haven't made any vow. Ella Amar Hare Alai Seorim. If instead you said, I'm just going to bring Seorim, this is following the language edit of the Shita Mikubetzet, that if you say that, well then patur, you're not going to be obligated in a mincha because it's clear that your intention is not about a mincha but about bringing barley. There is no voluntary barley offering, and therefore you haven't sworn anything valid, and your oath is completely meaningless. And so therefore we are that's what the Gemara means. So again, it could be either that you use the phrase minchat instead of mincha, or it could be that you didn't use the word mincha at all. To me, the logic applies both of these, that both of these cases could be covered by what Zeiri is saying. But in any event, Yosef Rav Nachman, back into the Gemara, middle of the second line, Yosef Rav Nachman, v'ka'amar la lahashmaita. So Rav Nachman was telling this over, Esve Rava Rav Nachman. And Rava asked the question, 1 second, and we're going to ask basically the same question over and over again from our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says, Kemach Yavi Solas, that if he swears that he's going to bring a regular flour mincha, he brings a refined flour mincha. But Lav L'Dolo Amar mincha, isn't the phraseology of our Mishnah implying that he just swears, I'm bringing Kemach, and he doesn't mention the word mincha at all? No, lo de amar mincha. We're going to say no. He said the word mincha also, meaning he's bringing a mincha shel kemach. Second, below Shem and Lavona, then the next words in our Mishnah are saying that he's going to bring it without oil and Lavona. And so Yavi Shemen Lavona, and he has to bring the Shemen and Lavona anyway. My lab Delo Amar Mincha, maybe in that situation he didn't mention Mincha either, and all he said is I'm going to bring without oil and without Lavona, and the implication is that there's going to be a Mincha. Lo, Damar Mincha. No, he said, I'm going to bring a Mincha without below Shemen or Lavona. But if he had just said, I'm going to bring without Shemen and Lavona, we wouldn't say Tafas Lavashon Rishon, and therefore it would not be, there would be no obligation to bring anything. What about the next language? Chatzi isaron, yavai isaron shalem. We said that if you have to bring half an isaron, you bring a full isaron. My labdelo amar mincha. Isn't that a situation where you didn't mention the mincha offering at all? No, lo damar mincha. He said the mincha. In each of these cases, if we want to make this consistent with Zeiri, and so as a result, Zeiri would say that the case involves a person who says, I'm going to bring a mincha of chatzi isaron. So ihachi ema seifa. But 1 second. This only goes so far. What about the one of the last cases of our Mishnah? Maybe the last case of our Mishnah. Isaron umechza yabi shnayim. That if you say you're going to bring an isaron and a half, you have to bring two. But why? Kavan de amar mincha ichayev lebi isaron. Well, you're going to tell me that he says the word mincha. Well, once he says that I'm going to bring a mincha of a half an isaron and an isaron, ichayev le. I'm sorry, that he's going to bring a mincha of an isaron and a half. So ichayev le bi isaron. So he's, as soon as he says that, he's obligated to bring the isaron. So ki amar chatzi isaron, when he then says at the end of his statement that he's going to bring half an isaron, lo klom kamar. He said nothing. He doesn't repeat the word mincha in that situation. He didn't say mincha twice. So lo tzricha de amar harei alai mincha chatzi isaron v'isaron. No, the situation must be that where he said, I'm going to bring a mincha of half an isaron and an isaron. And so in that situation, Kavan de Amar mincha ichayev lebi isaron. When he says, I'm going to bring a mincha of half an isaron, so he said, I'm going to bring a mincha. So that's a valid mincha. He's obligated in mincha number one. Ki amar chatzi isaron below klum kamar. And then when he adds the words half an isaron, that doesn't do anything. But ki hadar amar isaron, and then when he says and another isaron, mais isaron achrina. Well, now he has to bring a second isaron, and so that's why the Mishnah says that he has to bring two isaron. Well, ihachi. 1 second. You've now said that in every situation in our Mishnah, the person mentions the nature of the mincha that he's offering. Well, Rabbi Shimon Poter, Rabbi Shimon says that in every situation you're exempt. Shalo hisnadiv kederach hamisnadvim, because you didn't make a donation in the way that people make donations. But Amai, this is the way people make donations. Why not say that you're obligated? After all, based on what we're saying so far, our Mishnah, this is according to essentially Chizkiah, that our Mishnah does follow like Beis Shammai. So why shouldn't it be obligated? So they could take a look at Rashi, Ihachi, Rabbi Shimon Poter, Kaven Tfos Lashon Rishon, since we focus on the first language, V'ihu Amar Mincha, and he specifically said that he's going to bring a Mincha, Harei his Nadav Kederach Hamisnadvim. He did make an oath the way people make oaths. So, Amarava, Rabbi Shimon, Beshitas Rabbi Yossi Amara. Rabbi Shimon is not following the position of Beis Shammai. He's following the position of Rabbi Yossi. De Amar, the Gemar Dvarav, Adam Maspis, that a person focuses even on the last language. And Rashi tells us, Hakigir Sinkar Sinan, Af Begamar Dvarav Adam Nispas. It's the next Rashi. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9 lines down in the narrow lines of Rashi. De Lo Azlinan Basar Lashon Rishon Lichudei. We don't follow the beginning of the person's statement alone. Below basar achron lichudei, and we don't follow the last thing the person says alone. Ela basar kulo. We follow the whole statement. V'zeh amar mincha chatzi isaron ve'isaron, and somebody who says that they're bringing a mincha with half an isaron and another isaron, peirushe kamifarish mincha shel chatzi isaron. What they're ve'isaron. They're defining what a mincha is, and he's saying a half isaron with an isaron. And that is that it doesn't follow the way people make oaths. And the aleph there on the Hagoza Bach takes out the rest of that Rashi. So as a result, that's how we understand this. And so as a result, that's what we're talking about. And so we have now concluded our understanding and essentially, again, have two different ways of understanding our Mishnah. And it's based on how the Gemara is concluding. It certainly seems like our Mishnah is following Beit Shammai, that we focus on a person's initial language. Though, again, you can also understand it like Rabbi Yochanan says, that we're dealing with a situation where the person then clarifies that if it's a reasonable mistake, what they really intended was to do the right thing. Okay, so Misnadev Adam, next Mishnah, Misnadev Adam Mincha Shel Shishim Isaron, Umevi Bichli Echad. That if you want, you can commit to offering a mincha of 60 isaron, and you can bring it all in one vessel.
Wow.
Im amar harei alai shishim ve'echad. But if you say you're going to bring 61, maybe shishim bekli echad, ve'echad bekli echad. You bring 60 in one and one in the other. Shekain hatzibor, maybe biyom tov harishon shel chag, shechol liot b'shabes, shishim ve'echad. That when if you go through the calendar and say, on what day does the community offer the most mincha offerings? It's on a first day of Sukkot that falls on Shabbos, and you would offer 61, shishim ve'echad. So dayoli yachid shahu pachot min hatzibor echad. So given that the community as a whole could offer 61, will tell of an individual, listen, don't try to out trump the entire community, just bring 60. And so that is, sorry for not scrolling, that is the position of the Tanakama in our Mishnah. Now, how do you get to 61? So you have on on Shabbos, first day of Sukkot, you have 13 bulls and 14 lambs, all in connection with the holiday. 13 bulls, each of them have 3 isaron. 13 times 3, Mark, is
39.
39, exactly. 39. 14 lambs. Lambs are each 1 isaron. 14 times 1, Mark, is
14.
Excellent. So that we have now 39 plus 14. 39 plus 14 is 53. Amazing. Then we have the Musaf offering, which is 2 rams. 2 rams each have 2 isaron. Rams are 2 isaron for each ram. So 2 times 2 is 4. 53 plus 4 is 57. And then because it's Shabbos, we have 2 sacrifices, 2 lambs on Shabbos. 2 times 1 is 2. Adding 57 plus 2 is 59. And then finally, we have the 2 of the Korban Tamid. Each of them are lambs. So those are 2 times 1 is 2. 59 plus 2 is 61. That is exactly right. And that's exactly the number that we needed to get to. So that's position of the Tanakama. Rabbi Shimon says no. Rabbi Shimon says, I'm a Rabbi Shimon. Hello, elu leparim ve'elu lekvasim. You're mixing things up. You got a few bulls there, and you got some lambs. And what did we say? Ve'enam nivlalin zeh im zeh. You can't mix the two because the bulls have a greater ratio of oil to a lamb has 1 isa. I'm sorry, have a greater ratio of flour to oil, whereas a lamb has 1 isaron of flour and 3 lugin of oil. A bull has 3 esronim of flour and 6 lugin of oil. So it's the oil in lugin is twice the amount of esronim of flour, whereas for a lamb it's 3 times. So the lamb mixture of oil and flour is going to be more liquidy than the bull's mixture of flour and oil. And as a result, we cannot mix the two of them together. So the whole idea here is to tell me the limit on how much could go in one pot. It has nothing to do with the total number of the day. So because those aren't combined in one, el ad shishim yecholim lebalel, as we have seen throughout our Masechet, that we have this concept that up until 60 isaron, you have the ability to mix something well. But when you have more than that, then you don't have the ability to mix it well. So Amru lo, shishim nivlalin, shishim ve'echad ein nivlalin. You're going to tell me that 1 additional isaron makes such a big difference? Amru lahem. Kol midas chachamim kain. That is true with respect to every kind of measurement that the rabbis give. After all, ba'arba'im sa'ah hu tovel. We say that somebody does tefillah, that a person in 40 saw of water. And how did we determine 40 saw? The way we determined it is what is the amount that a person must have, the minimum amount that a person must have. And so as a result, what we're saying is, u'ba'arba'im sa'ah chasar kurtov enu yachol litbal behen. And you're telling me that with 40 saw less one kortov, which is 161,440th of the entire amount of 40 saw. You're going to tell me that missing that small amount is going to cause somebody to be unable to immerse themselves? And the answer is yes. That's exactly what we're going to tell somebody. And so as a result, we're going to say that in fact that's what matters. What matters is that do you have do you have the rabbinically determined right amount? So now the Gemara quotes a brisa that expands on our Mishnah and gives additional details to the conversation. So she'il she'ela l'ma'ala Rabbi Yehuda bar Eli. So they asked the question in front of Rabbi Yehuda bar Eli, and we'll see why that his presence is relevant in just a moment. Minayin la'omer harei alai shishim ve'echad. How do I know that if you say that I'm going to bring 61 isaron as a mincha offering, maybe shishim b'kli echad, that you bring 60 in one and one in another. So pasuk Rabbi Yehuda bar Eli, Rosh Hamidabrim b'chol makom v'amar. So Rabbi Yehuda bar Eli, the person who speaks first in all situations, began to say. Now, what's the story with that? So the Gemara, the Rashi tells us to look somewhere else. Rosh Hamidabrim b'chol makom. Kari le hachi. They called him that. They called him the person who speaks first. Mishum ma'isa because of the situation that happened in Masechah Shabbos. Now, what in a cave in Masechah Shabbos? Now, what happened? They were having a private conversation, and Rabbi Yehuda bar Eli says that, you know what, the Romans aren't so bad. The Romans are good because they created the bridges and this and what else? And a variety of other good things for and roads and things of that sort. And so as a result, you know what? They aren't so bad. Whereas the other rabbis who were there in this private conversation said, you know what? No, it's not. They're not so great. Anyway, long story short, the Romans heard about the conversation and they said, you know what? That we're going to give problems to the people who said bad things, but we're going to make a rule that Rabbi Yehuda bar Eli should always speak first. And so that is why he is this person. And so what does he say? He's going to give the first answer of our Mishnah. Shishim ve'echad dayol yachad minatzibor echad. So he says, listen, on the first day of Sukkot that falls on Shabbos, you end up bringing 61 isaron, and so as a result, it should be sufficient for an individual to bring one less than that. That's why we don't do anything more than 60. Amar lo Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon said to him, "V'lo elu parim ve'elu ve'elim ve'elu klasim." But we have on the one hand bulls and rams, and on the other hand lambs. And again, bulls and rams both do 2 log for every isaron, whereas lambs do 3 log of shemen for every isaron. So elu b'lilasan ava. The first are going to be thicker, the bulls and the rams. The elu b'lilasan raka, whereas the mixture of flour and oil is going to be thinner for the lambs because they have a greater percentage of oil in it. Then, in addition, you have some of the 61 are done in the morning, and others are done in the afternoon, because after all, we included the korban tamid, and the korban tamid, one is brought in the morning and one is brought in the afternoon. So they are not all mixed together. So why in the world are we determining what is going to be capable of being put in one container based on this? So amrulo amorata. So 1 second. So it should be, even though it says amrulo, it should be based on the Shita Mekubetzes, it should be amarlo, because this is Rabbi Yehuda responding. So they said to him, Rabbi Yehuda said to Rabbi Shimon, so tell me, you say what it is. So amar, and again, instead of lahem, it should be lo, according to the Shita Mekubetzes. So amar lo. So they said. So Rabbi Shimon says back to Rabbi Yehuda, Harehu Omer. Well, that's the Torah says the following: V'chol mincha belulav Hashemin v'chareba. Every mincha that is mixed with oil that is dry. Well, 1 second. Kvar Amra Torah. The Torah has always has referenced prior to this a mixture of blulav Hashem. And there are many times where the Torah references mixing of the shemen with a mincha offering. Have mincha sheyachol lihibalel. So the point is that it's telling us that you have to bring a mincha that is capable of being mixed. So Amar Lo b'shishim nivlolin, and Rabbi Yehuda is saying that we have a tradition that in 60 isaron you can do the mixing. B'shishim ve'echad ein nivlolin, but when you have 61, you can't do the mixing. So Amar Lo kol midas chachamim keinu. I'm sorry. My apologies. Amar Lo b'shishim nivlolin b'shishim ve'echad ein nivlolin. So Rabbi Yehuda asked the question. That's ridiculous that you're cutting it so finally. With 60, you can mix it, and with 61, you can't mix it. And so Rabbi Shimon responds, Amar Lo, kol midas chachamim keinu. That's exactly right. 60 you can mix, 61 you can't. For example, and now we give more than just the example that we gave in our Mishnah, but arba'im sahu tovel, you can tovel in 40 sa of water, but arba'im sa chaser kortov ein yachol litbol, but in 40 minus a kartov, which is very small, you're not going to be able to immerse yourself. It kivetza mitame tumas ochlin, when you have an egg size of food, that is what is necessary to convey tuma of food. Kivetza chaser shum shum ein mitame tumas ochlin. But if it's a little smaller than an egg, all you have to be missing is one sesame seed from the egg size, and you're not going to convey tuma. Shlosha al shlosha mitame midras. If you have a 3 tvachim by 3 tvachim piece of cloth and it's sat on by a zav, it can convey tuma of midras. But if it's less than 3 tvachim by 3 tvachim, shlosha al shlosha chaser nima achas, if it's missing even just one thread from the 3 tvachim by 3 tvachim, eino mitame to midras. It's not going to convey tuma. Okay, so all right, that's the brisa, and now we're going to say v'chi ein nivlolin my havi. Who cares whether you mix it? Meaning, Rabbi Shimon just told us that what's key is the ability to mix it. But who cares whether you mix it? Meaning, why should the ability to mix it matter? V'hatanan, we learned earlier in our Maseches, this is back on Daf Yud Chet Amud Aleph, we learned the Mishnah that says, Im lo balal kasher. If you didn't mix it all together, it's still going to be valid. So Amar Rabbi Zera, and Rabbi Zera says the statement that we've seen throughout our Maseches, and it turns out to be often a more broad policy of the Gemara. Kol haroi labila ein bila ma'akebes. Whenever something is capable of being mixed, the mixing does not matter. But if it cannot be mixed, well, then mixing is necessary. And so as a result, that's exactly right. If you have 60 or less, then if you didn't mix it, it's still a valid mincha. But if you have 61, because you cannot mix it, even if you don't mix it, it's not going to be valid. And so as a result, 61 isaron is always going to be invalid because of this principle. All right, so the Gemara now turns to the specificity of other measurements of the Chachamim. But for that discussion, you'll need to stay tuned for tomorrow's daf. Wishing you a Shabbat Shalom and continued learning together. Looking forward to continuing our learning next week. Have a wonderful Shabbos.